And good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I am your host, Kim Davis. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is Tuesday, May the 16th. I cannot believe we are already halfway through May. And I also cannot believe that we are inching closer to the NBA Finals. But tonight, as the conference finals get underway, we will get a chance to see the lottery and see what happens with the Rockets. But listen, we'll talk about all that in just a little bit. Welcome to Chalk Talk this week. A lot to get to. Thank you for being here as always. And before we get started, I always want to take a minute to say hello to all of you and say thanks to the people that help us make this show happen each and every week. We've got a new partner. It is Champ. It's an organization a nonprofit that really serves veterans. They're providing resources for veterans in crisis, trying to find their way after they get back from serving this nation. And so one of the things that Champ wants to encourage all of us to do is to remember the number 988, not just for veterans, but for anybody. If you see someone in crisis, 988 is a number you should call. That's the number that can call for mental health crises if you think somebody is in danger of endangering themselves. And so you'll hear more about Champ as we go through the summer. We are glad to have them on as a partner, and we appreciate the great work they do. Of course, there's always our good friends over at I Love Jinka. I told you that coming up in June, there's going to be some exciting announcements as they are expanding what they do to other parts of Texas in their relationship with HEB. And speaking of veterans, they're also going in the military. You'll hear more about that as that relationship goes live. So we're super proud of the work that Kim and LJ Williams are doing with Jinka. And just a reminder, if this is your first time joining us, Jinka is a turmeric paste. It's good for inflammation. It's good for all things healthy with your immune system. And it is actually a food product and not a supplement. So it won't interfere with medications. It's made with 8 different herbs, turmeric being the primary ingredient. And it is good for a lot of different stuff. And if you want to know what to do with it, you can get it in a paste form and put it in like a smoothie or almond milk, or you can get it now in vegan capsules. And they've also released a powder. So whatever is the easiest way for you to get it in, if you want to protect your joints, if you want to, work on your blood pressure, your cholesterol without having to take statin medicines, you might want to. I'm encouraging you to give I Love Jinka a try. And if you are in an area where there's an HEB, this is where you can find it in HEB.
Here at HEB in the Healthy Living Department of Probiotics, you can find Jinka 7 days a week.
Yep. Look at a lot of Jinka sale. Look at that. Jinka.
So as you saw from the spot, you can find it in the healthy living sections. Right now, it's in many stores in Southeast Texas. In June, they're going to be expanding to more than 100, and I forget the number, additional stores. So those of you in Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, other places, you'll be able to get it as well. When they roll out their next release, I'll have them come on and join us and talk about some things that's happening with their company. Also, there are always Kimmy treats. And for those of you who've reached out to me and said, I'm in Houston, I don't mind ordering from the website, but where's that place again? Well, you can go to Sunshine's Vegetarian Deli. And it's, if you're in the NRG area, near the medical center, not far from downtown, over on Old Spanish Trail, they have Kimmy treats. So I just took a fresh batch of Kimmy bars on it yesterday. Somebody called me. Actually, somebody called a friend I know and said, hey, there were no Kimmy bars. So Kimmy bars are back. There's also the vegan popcorn and body butter. So thank you for supporting Kimmy Treats. Kimmy Treats is also supporting Chalk Talk. You can order it online at kimmytreats.com, or you can get it from Sunshine's. And hopefully pretty soon, we're going to roll out to a few more locations. And here's what to look for. This is also this time of year where we want to get out. It's the summer. I mean, I know it's not technically the summer if you're in Houston, but it's the summer, okay? So one of the things that's super important is protecting our skin, really good skincare. Our friends over at Sohum Skin do a great job of not just giving the absolute best facials that you're ever going to have, but providing you with the right kind of tools and products you need to keep your skin glowing and looking natural and healthy. So call Stephanie at Sohum, and when you go see her, this is really what your experience will probably be like. Sohum Skin and over on the East End, you will not be sorry. Okay, so let's get to it. I am super excited today to have one of my favorite people, but clearly also one of the audience's favorite people joining us. I reached out to him yesterday, and I thought, what better person to have come and join us? There's so much to talk about, and so he agreed. So I'd like to welcome to the show. I guess he's kind of a Chalk Talk regular, but he's definitely a Chalk Talk legend. That is Brandon Scott. You may hear him on Sports Radio 610. He's also doing a spot podcast. He has his own podcast, and he's also doing one about the Rockets. So welcome to the show, Mr. Brandon Scott.
Hey, Kim, thank you for having me.
I finally can do a couple little sounds. The
bad.
platform continues to expand.
I wasn't ready for the applause. I should have waited for the applause there. I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Well, I wasn't sure if it's going to work because I've been working on these other little things that they're gradually letting us add into the platform, but it's working now. So welcome. So, so much to get to. I'm so glad that you were available to join me today. I know you've been filling in on a lot of shows. And so it worked out. And I'm like, oh, great. I can have Brandon on. There has been a lot going on. I want to first talk a little bit about rookie camp. And before we do that, Brandon, I'm going to play a little bit of sound from D'Amico Ryans and also from a couple of the rookies. But, the rookies were in town last week, and it was 2 days, right? It was mini camp. It wasn't a whole lot, but they were in the building, and it was really cool to see him there. And I did get a chance to ask Coach, what is it that he wanted the rookies to take away or be able to do? And I asked him that because I remember in the past, maybe it was Lovey or somebody who said one year, first, we just want them to know how to get around the building. Here's what D'Amico said.
That is the first step, get around it. No, but the most important thing for me, Kim, is for those guys is to have just a general understanding of the terminology, offense, defense, terminology. Because learning the offense, it's like learning a new language. So then you have to learn how to speak that language and speak it fluently, especially for CJ stepping into the huddle and making those play calls. So the biggest thing is how much and how quickly can they grasp the terminology and be able to communicate that effectively when they're on the field.
That's right. That may seem like a little thing, Brandon, but communication is at the heart of every relationship, but that's huge. It's very different for what they're going to experience at this next level. But I didn't have any real high expectations of what the rookies would do. It's 2 days. It's just the rookies. It's the new staff. And I think it's just kind of welcome to the building and let's start here. What were your thoughts about this first kind of experience with the new rookies?
Yeah, I think rookie minicamp, Kim, for the public, for people like us and for the fans and people that listen and watch your podcast and my podcast, it's just about laying eyes on the new players. Like this is the future of the team. It's an exciting time. You haven't had enough time yet because they haven't played to either confirm or be disappointed about whatever your expectations are. And so you just have the excitement of seeing the players. And so I think that's really the fun part of it is just, they'd released the jersey numbers the day before, a day or two before they actually had the camp. And you just kind of got this build up excitement around these new players, again, before you actually do the thing that we're actually here for, right? The results on the field. We just because of time, we haven't gotten that far yet. So to me, it's its own sort of hype machine. And of course, you know how it works, having been in the business. Like it's a hype machine that kind of sells itself, and that people are just, you know, are energized around. And I think that's good. I love the energy around the draft and around rookie mini camp and all of it. I think I don't need like a great reason to be excited or to have fun. So like I'm all for everybody having their fun and everything. You know, I love it. But as far as the part of what D'Amico Ryans was saying, the sound that you played there from Coach D'Amico Ryans, I think that is maybe an underrated part of the transition, right? It's just the communication, because when we look at rookies and we look at the players going into the draft, we just think about how good they are and how are their skills going to translate to the NFL. What's their ceiling? Could they be a superstar? Is CJ Stroud a franchise quarterback? And is Will Anderson worth trading all those draft picks for and all of that? But the basics of how do I get them to speak this new language is really, really important, because once they get into the nitty gritty of, you know, actual training camp, once they get past OTAs and get to actual training camp and to, you know, obviously the preseason and the actual season, they're not going to be able to hold their hands through everything. They will need to have done the communication transfer by then. So
and that's the key part of it, right? That's one of the first things they have to learn. They've got to learn, and you'll hear them talk about it a little bit, just kind of how to be a pro, you know. And you know, now they have, and I think it was Juice who talked about it, and I'll play that from him. He talked about, you know, you have more time on your hands now. So all of those little things that we don't think about that are a part of this transition, they've got to do that. And so they have to do all of those things, and they've got to learn the language. Imagine if you're going, and it's not as foreign, right? Depending on where you played for, especially if you're a guy like a Will Anderson that came from, you know, a high level school like an Alabama, or a CJ Stroud who came from the Ohio State University. If you go to, you know, listen, I studied Spanish my entire life. And when I was in college at Texas A&M, I studied abroad, and I went to school in Spain, and all they spoke there was Spanish. And I knew going in that all they were going to speak was Spanish. I had been taking Spanish, but when I stepped onto the continent, you know, into the country, and everything was in Spanish, it took me a minute, because, you know, the dialect is different. You know, it was Gallego, which is different from the Spanish we speak here. And even though intellectually I knew the language, it wasn't what I had to talk all the time. So there was a learning curve. And so it's the same with them. I mean, not a great analogy, but that's what it makes me think of. You just got to learn how to communicate at another level. And there's no turning back. Like, I didn't have any options. Like, they were not talking in the university in English. I could say, I'm sorry, how does that translate? No, ma'am, this is what we're speaking here. And that's what's going to happen with these young players as they transition to the NFL.
Well, and also think about it, if we were just to, and that's the case for all of the rookies, for everybody. Right. But think about specifically those top two picks, those first two guys that they drafted, and CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, who you mentioned, come from the Ohio State and come from Alabama, but they're going to be doing different things. It's not like they're going to be running the exact same systems or be asked to do the exact same things that they were asked to do in roles that they excelled in college. So CJ Stroud, you talk about expectation and what they like, how soon is he going to start and what's he going to be? Well, it starts with making that transition from what they were doing at Ohio State to what they're going to be asking to do with the Texans. And it's a completely different system. Same thing with Will Anderson. They're going to ask him to play a different type of technique than what he was asked to do at Alabama. So
hold that thought about Will Anderson. I'm going to let you hear from what he said about that. He was asked a couple questions. It was interesting because I'm saying, look, guys, they just got their playbook 2 weeks ago. But here's Will Anderson when he talked about how he might be used.
I think one of the biggest things for me is just now going from college to NFL, everything is way more detailed. So really just clean up the moves that I already used and making sure I'm perfecting those moves is like forklift, things like that, and such a, you know, all those moves. So just dialing in really to my technique and making sure that I'm detailed with my hand placement, with my footwork and everything like that. Well, you know, being at Alabama, you know, they play me very versatile. So when we go to any type of flex defense, I was already playing a 5 technique, which, I'm kind of used to playing on the outside of the tackle. So, the 4 was just an adjustment for me, but my regular position was always, hand in the dirt, 5 technique and stuff like that, keying the outside pad of the tackle. So I'm kind of already used to that. I've been playing that kind of like my whole life since high school, regular defensive end. Alabama just used me in more different ways, differently, but I've had that experience.
So even with him knowing all that, Brandon, it's still different, right? It speeds up. It's still going to be a different system, but he, the fact that he's got some of that foundation, I think is one of the reasons that he becomes the 3rd overall pick in the draft, right? You go to get a guy like that because of the system he's come from, what he's shown you in that system. And so while I appreciate D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio saying, we're not putting pressure on these guys. There's no real, in terms of them being, the future or the center. But the reality is when you're picked with the 3rd overall, chosen with the 3rd overall selection in the draft, there are some expectations.
oh, come on now. Like that is the one thing where with the whole pressure conversation, like we're not going to put too much pressure on these guys. That's the thing. Well, look, I'm all for them not putting internal pressure on those guys. It's good for them to view it that way, to sort of internalize it a certain way. But the reality is the reality. You drafted these guys number 2 and number 3 overall. You traded multiple draft picks to move up to draft one of them. And so that pretty much speaks for itself. They obviously have pressure because, the placement of the draft pick for one. And then on top of that, you traded your own draft pick and have now kind of said yourself that you are now expecting to be a certain level of good. Like you can't be what you've been the last few years based off of the moves that you've made. So they're bold moves, and I support making bold moves, but you do have to call it what it is. And it's absolutely a bold move and a step in saying, and I would say a statement of, hey, we expect these guys to take us from here to there.
And I don't think but I understand how what they're doing, right, in terms of managing expectations.
Yeah.
So that they can get them in, focus on the work. I think that from what we've seen from both of them so far, that they have, to this point, from what I've seen, they got the right guys, right? Because they come in, they're excited to be here. To a fault, they each say, listen, I feel ready. I'm confident about it. I'm excited, but I haven't done anything at this level yet. They got that, right? There doesn't seem to be any level of entitlement, but at the same time, they don't seem to be shying away from the situation. I like that about them. Those are some of the qualities that if I'm going to invest picks and that kind of capital, because that is your capital at this point in the season, it's a draft. I'm going to invest it with guys that, at least from what I've seen to this point, give me that.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's what stands out to me about them as well, is that they've got workers. Like when you go into the draft, there are no perfect prospects. Talk about can't miss prospects. There are very few of those where you're just like, man, this person was created out of a lab. Most draft prospects have some sort of thing that you could nitpick or say, hey, this is something that they need to work on, or a weakness of theirs. I mean, we see it in scouting profiles, strengths, weaknesses, and everybody has a list of weaknesses. But the thing that I like most about those two guys specifically, and I could say this to a degree about really all of the guys that they drafted, but those two specifically, is that when you break down whatever those weaknesses would be in the scouting profile, and then go and listen to these guys talk and see how people talk about them and see what their work habits appear to be like, it makes you feel good about them being able to address said weaknesses.
Absolutely. There are no perfect prospects. And so another prospect that some people kind of question, like, wow, why would the Texans, draft Juice Scruggs, right? Why would they move up to take him? Because there's some people that maybe weren't as high on him. There are others who thought that's a great move, but that's why you've got to trust your own internal, just like in your own business or whatever it is you do. You've got to trust whatever your strategy is, and whatever your intel tells you. You got to trust, like, you know what, this might not be a person that I would have, that somebody else would have on my show, but I would. This not be something that I would add to my business, that somebody else would add to their business, but I would. So Juice Scruggs is one of those guys. He's a guy that can play. He played at Penn State. He can play multiple positions on the line. There are many who think, okay, is he going to come in so he can play either of the guard positions, and probably even center. So they moved up and got him. And so here's Juice talking about how it's been for him since the draft.
Ever since that phone call, it's been a lot of moving parts. It's definitely been nonstop moving. Just trying to I'm trying to block everything else out and just focus on the playbook. Just trying to learn that as quick as possible. And really just trying to soak everything in, enjoy the moment, and be where my feet are.
One of the other things he said, Brandon, was he was asked about CJ because, they faced each other, and if he had a chance to really spend time with him. And obviously those relationships with the offensive line and the quarterback are really very important. He talked about how he did hear from Laramie Tunsil and Titus Howard, but this is what he had to say about CJ Stroud.
Yeah, it's been really cool. We had some crazy battles with Ohio State, and just be able to meet him, how humble he is and how passionate he is about this game. I'm excited to work with him and just getting to know him. And like you said, just trying to build that relationship, get that chemistry going. And what I thought about him in college, I thought he was the best quarterback in the country for sure.
So that's what he said about his new quarterback. And, we'll see. I mean, but I like the fact that they all say, listen, I just got to get my bearings. I mean, it's a good sign. I've covered this league a long time, and there are a lot of players that come into the league, Brandon, and don't realize that they need to kind of get squared away first, right? It's the, woo, I'm in the league. But it is such a business. It has always been a business, but it's also a great opportunity. And so just the ones that we've met so far seem to get it. And I hope that continues to be the case as we get to meet the others.
Yeah, so with Juice Scruggs, there, like you mentioned before, there's some question or criticism of what was the evaluation that said they should trade up for this guy? Like, why would they, trade, especially if this is not the one for around this spot that you would trade up for? Like, it seemed a little odd, okay, but I still like the idea of them identifying the player that they want at the position they want. And more than anything, like, let's just be honest about it. We don't have, like, they traded up to get Juice Scruggs. Most of us don't have the intel and I would say, like, wherewithal to know who are the centers that are worth trading up for the most part. Like, and so when a team does that, when a team trades up for a center, it makes me think, okay, what are they identifying that I don't see or that I don't know about? Like, there's clearly something that they know that I don't know. Now, they need to be right about it, of course, right? Like, the fans and the media is going to hold the Texans accountable for this pick. But to your point, when you hear this guy talk, it sounds like they got the right guy. Now, can he play? We'll find that out in the long run. But
you know what, Brandon? Isn't it fair to say, though, that's the case with any draft pick, right? If we go back over the drafts historically, I mean, if we talk about how many first round, and I don't do a whole lot of those stats. I mean, I do look at it, but I don't really bring it into the show in terms of who made it and who didn't, right? So that's why I'm okay with it. If they feel like this guy can give them what they need, I mean, he was surprised, right? He was surprised. I'm with you. If you've identified that this is a need, and you think he has the qualities that meet that need, and he was there at a spot where you felt like you were willing to, he was worth it to you in that round. Listen, you want him to be right, but you want him to be right on all of them.
Yeah, but I just think that when they trade up, whenever you trade up, it's an extra aggressive move to get that guy. That's why I think like CJ Stroud has obvious pressure on him because he's a quarterback. He's the number 2 overall pick. Like, you don't have to overstate what the pressure is on CJ Stroud, but at the very least, he was a sensible pick a sensible pick himself at a sensible slot, the number 2 overall pick. But this Will Anderson thing, like, he would have made sense to draft at number 3, but they had number 12 and traded up to number 3. Right. So it's all the more and gave up next year's their own first round pick, which a lot of people expect to be a high pick because no one expects the Texans to do anything except perhaps themselves. And so that's an aggressive move to trade up to go get that guy. It puts a little bit extra sauce on the pick a little bit. And then same thing now with Juice, just to a different degree, because it's a center and it's a second round pick, and the resources that you use to go get them aren't necessarily as flashy, but it still is like a strong, bold statement of this is our guy. And so from that standpoint, you do want them to be right. You can still respect, even if they're wrong, you can still respect. This is where I'll come from with it, is that I'll still respect it, but it would be an obvious miss if it didn't work out when you made such an aggressive move for there. But before we even get that far, it sounds like you like the things that you hear. Like it sounds good already. And I'll say another thing too, Kim, about the whole center. I always like the idea, and like it even more now that they've identified these guys and drafted them, but I always liked the idea of, if you're going to go get a rookie quarterback and start from scratch from the quarterback position, of pairing him with a center, of a young center, and letting them grow together.
Grow together. Yeah.
But
here's the other thing too with this line.
But I like the idea of two young guys together.
I do too, and I think we talked about in the offseason that this and hey, good morning, Lawanda and Spencer said they traded up. And here's a compliment from Kevin Walker. He says, "Dang, dude got late night R&B radio pipes plus quality takes." Listen, compliments from Kevin Walker are big here, right? So just
I'll take it.
Take it.
I appreciate that very much.
I think that these offensive line additions they've added are also really good for Kenyon Green, right? Who they selected high last year. He started slow. He was a little banged up, and you could say he had a rough rookie season. It was really talk about thrown into the fire, because he faced like the best at the opposite from him the entire season, so there was really not a whole lot. There was no really margin for error. So he got to learn a lot. I'm really curious to see Kenyon Green in year 2, right? Because I don't know how much more you could learn than learn it the way he did last year. So, we'll see. So Spencer says they traded up for Juice because they were so bad at that position. A solid, smart guy can be a big asset to a team that was so disappointing at that position. The Texans were overmatched in every center 0-1 technique matchup. Everyone.
Yes.
Right. That's, absolutely. Every time. There was they just never won it.
Yeah.
So even though I just will bring this up one time, I won't mention him a whole lot. Davis Mills wasn't great. I won't say his name a lot. That line situation, even with the Tunzel having one of his best seasons, and Titus being the consistent Titus, it was rough.
I'm glad that Spencer chimed in here though, because Spencer, obviously this validates what I'm saying.
It makes us feel smart, right? When Spencer can come in and clean it up for us.
Especially several weeks later, when I said, kind of trying to be cute a little bit here, Kim, but on sportsradio610.com, when I was trying to outline or at least list the Texans' biggest needs in the offseason, and this was before the draft, this is before any trades or anything like this, is even before free agency. So several weeks back, I was saying, okay, put quarterback to the side because that one is obvious. Outside of that, they really need a center, and I argued that it was their biggest need. And so even to the point where I was a little disappointed that they didn't address it maybe more aggressively in free agency, but then you see what they did aggressively in the draft. And so this is their plan for it. And so, like I said earlier, that's why I respect it and can respect it, even if it doesn't work out. But I'm more so at this point, as we speak here in May, just a couple of weeks after they draft these guys, willing to entertain the optimistic side and feel like, hey, these guys sound like they come from good stock, good pedigree, sounds like it could work, something that they needed to address, and they did so.
I think they addressed a lot of needs. They got the receiver from University of Houston, who is, if that one works, right? By all accounts, he's got a lot of speed. He's got that kind of, I hate to say swag, but that you kind of need at that position, right? He's got that. If John Mechie is back and is able to be first of all healthy, because that's what's most important. His health apparently is in a good spot. Now he's got to get football ready. That could be really huge for them. And so they've done some things to address some needs, and also they addressed some needs in free agency. They did more of the veteran needs, right, to shore up some other roles with their free agent moves, and then they went and addressed the other needs that they had in the draft. So I don't have any real criticism about what they did, and I don't know how anybody could at this point, because until we see what happens, like, we have thoughts, right? We've seen 2 days of rookie mini camp, for 20 minutes each day, and OTAs, are going on, and then there'll be a veteran mini camp in June. They'll take a break, they'll come back, and then we'll get ready for training camp. But the reality is, until these guys hit the field in a real game, we don't really know. There's gonna be a whole lot of speculation and pontificating and conversation between now and September, which is a fun part of what we do. But it'll be interesting to see how this process unfolds.
Yeah, and I think too, Kim, for a team that was as far away and has been as far away as the Texans have been, it's important to distinguish the difference between being happy with what they did and whether they are there yet, right? Because it's not like they could solve every problem in one offseason. And we can acknowledge that the last couple of off seasons have just been rough. It's been real hard to add talent to this team. They really are on year 2 of being able to do so. So
they keep starting over. Like the rebuild is really, this isn't the 3rd year of it. And although Nick doesn't want to call it a rebuild, the rest of us in the, real on planet Earth know it is. And it is kind of the 2nd year, because they did get some picks last year that they can build on, right? Yep. And now this year they've taken the next step, and they've got the quarterback. They've got their head coach. And so I think all of those things are important. I want to put a pin, Brandon, in our Texans talk for just a minute, because I want us to pivot for a little bit and talk about what's happening in the NBA. And so before we talk about the playoffs and how we got here to the conference finals, the fact that 2 coaches that are that started the playoffs are now out of work, although their names are both being mentioned for other head coaching positions, I want to talk about the Houston Rockets. Tonight's a big night, right? There's the lottery is going to be tonight. We'll find out what the lottery lineup is for the upcoming draft. Although the Houston Rockets had the worst record in the league, they are not guaranteed the number 1 pick, right? They are in the same spot with Detroit and San Antonio to see each have a 14% chance of getting the right ping pong ball that gets them the number 1 pick. That's a really big deal. But for me, the other part of it is all of this conversation about James Harden and whether or not he should come back. Before we talk about it, I just want to remind people of the last time James Harden was in a Rockets uniform.
James, are you surprised that y'all never made a run at all? In this one?
We're just not good enough. We don't. Obviously, chemistry, talent-wise, just everything, and it was clear. Like I said, these last few games, they just from the beginning of the game, they were just aggressive. Veteran team, obviously, a championship team, and one of the best teams that we have in this league. I love this city. I literally, have done everything that I can. This situation is crazy. It's something that I don't think can be fixed. So, thanks.
Yeah, it wasn't over. He just got up and bounced. And I remember being on this side of the Zoom going, what just happened? So that's James Harden, who came into camp late and overweight, and he didn't want to be here. He was mad about talent. He wanted to run off. He wanted them to run off Russ. They did. Russ didn't want to be here either. It was always some drama, right? So he went off to win a championship. He went to the Nets. Fell out of love there. That didn't work. Then he went to the Sixers. They won a Game 7 on Sunday, which was just a pathetic final look for him. And granted, the league MVP wasn't a whole lot better. But for those of us who covered James Harden for his entire tenure with the Rockets, I'm like, I'm good. This is a young team, right? He's not going to make him a championship team in a season. He's on the other side of his career. He's still got some things to offer, but I would probably argue that you didn't do everything you could to help this team win. I mean, I'm going to let go of the 0 for 10 from 3, but I'm just saying the idea of James Harden coming back, I don't feel real good about that. Brandon Scott, I don't know where you feel you could be different. What are your thoughts?
I think it's really fascinating, honestly, because if you were to paint out a player profile of like the type of player that the Rockets need to help them become better, or if you were to list the things that the Rockets need to be better, it would be things like shooting, shot making, playmaking, basketball intelligence, a lot of things that James Harden, frankly, does have to offer even at this stage of his career. And so from that standpoint, and then you'd also have to look at it from the fact that similar to the Texans, the Rockets are now obviously very recently in a position where they can spend a lot of money in free agency. And this year, the list of free agents, when you look at it past James Harden, when you talk about guys of that ilk, the rest of the guys are, some combination of Kyrie Irving, Kristaps Porzingis, Chris Middleton. So when you start talking about the guys that would even be available, James Harden is right there with the caliber of player that you could get at the top of the line in free agency and probably fits a more specific need for you as the Rockets. So like if you were to remove the history and the context that you just provided there with that clip and everything that we know about James Harden and everything that happened here with the history with James Harden, then in a vacuum as a player, it would make a lot of sense. Even as he's kind of declining in age and the idea that you could maybe sign him for just a couple of years, it would be really fascinating. But the thing is, you can't remove the context. You can't remove everything that you just talked about. And that is what makes it so interesting because like for the fans and for like all of us who were here, we're looking at it like, why would he come back and why would he be welcome back? Why would he want to come back after that? And why would you want him after he left like that?
So here's the thing I say, Brandon. Now, you can, on paper, that profile looks really good. But what we also know is on paper, what we know that beyond the paper, right? When we talk about James Harden, that I'm going to say I've covered a couple of games where I feel like he quit. Yeah. And for me, that's just a deal breaker. Maybe it's the athlete in me, or maybe it's just it's an integrity piece for me. And that's not something that I think you want, because if James comes back, James is not going to come back and it not be his team, right? So then what happens to the guys who are starting to make their way? If you're trying to build this new, and everyone wants to use the word culture, how do you stick him back in it? Right? Does that then change? Because you've covered these young guys. We see how the Jalen Greens and the Jabari Smith Juniors and those guys are coming along, and whoever they're going to get in this upcoming draft. Is James the influence that you want in that locker room? I just don't know. I don't know that that's ultimately, if I can get beyond statistically those things that the profile gives me, it's the other part of the profile to me that is equally as important. It's what got you players like, and I'm going to go way back to when they were champions, what got you players like a Mario Ellie, right? Because of all the other things that he did that ended up helping this team become a championship team. So Kevin Walker says, please, please, please don't bring that dude back here. No circumstance. The fact that he just said he did everything he can speaks to who he is. Oh, yeah. Feel free to mention that the Lakers head coach Ham is a Red Raider. Obviously, Kevin went to Texas Tech. So, and I like what Darvin Ham is doing. And then Charles, our legal expert for Chalk Talk, says, I'm not going to say a word because my mother has always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Harden is the past. And then Spencer, I appreciate Spencer chiming in, says culture trumps talent. Harden is a slow cancer. He's not a leader. When you insert a guy with his disposition to your lineup, it is not additive, it's disruptive.
Yeah, I think all of that is fair. I would say
all of that.
I would say it is impossible. It is impossible to, in good faith, defend James Harden's intangibles. They're just flat out not there. They're not there. Yeah. Point blank.
I don't know what you do with him. And listen, after the game, when they asked him about Doc Rivers, who Doc, what else could Doc have done, right? Your two superstars just disappeared. And they said, well, so, like, what do you think about Doc or something? They asked him the Doc question. Yeah, all right. He's always lukewarm at best. And those are the kind of things, but that's who he is. There's never any real responsibility. Like when they ran Dwight Howard off, Dwight Howard did show up in postseason in those games against the Clippers where James disappeared. He fell out of love with Dwight Howard. They got a divorce. He was, oh my gosh, you got to have CP3. They bring in CP3, and I still maintain this. I believe that the reason he wins MVP that season he did is because of the influence of CP3. They had this, it was all great. CP3 even had him written into the State Farm commercials. And then year 2, falls out of love with CP3. He got to go. Runs him off. I mean, it's just never enough, and there's never any accountability by him. And to me, that becomes a problem. So, well, first of all, we'll see what happens tonight. I hope that tonight the Rockets get the right ping pong ball. And if they do, we know who they're going to take because their owner, in a night of having probably 1 or 2 cocktails too many, just basically told everybody. But what are your thoughts as we approach this lottery tonight and then how this team moves forward based on what happens tonight?
Yeah, I think that with the possibility of getting the number 1 pick, like everything else that we talk about, that's so fun to talk about, the James Harden thing. If they get this pick, almost none of it matters. The rest of it matters. They could do almost anything. Because at this point, it's all about this one guy. Like he's the eraser at that point, I think, because all of a sudden he becomes your culture. That would be the one pushback I would have on James Harden and becoming his team. Now that they draft this guy.
And we're talking about Victor. I mean, it's just so that we're clear.
Yes.
He's
his name, Victor
all around Wembanyama. He's like the all around. There's no question he's going to be the number 1 pick.
Yeah. So if they draft Victor Wembanyama, then whatever they do in free agency is just going to be on the backdrop of that because he's that type of prospect. Nobody has seen anything like this or talked about a prospect like this really since LeBron James. Yeah. So I was listening.
Even I was going to say at one point Zion Williams. So, but it really probably you have to go back further to LeBron. Yeah. Yeah. And it worked with LeBron. I mean, he was all of that and continues to be.
Right. So that changes the trajectory of your franchise in ways that I don't even know if I can fully articulate right now. Like you are almost guaranteed to be a contender at some point, not right away necessarily, but at some point as that kid develops, Victor Wembanyama, I mean, and the whatever it is that you put around him, it'd be hard to mess that up and to not at the very least be like in the conference finals pretty routinely, so like you're setting your ceiling totally differently. If you're able to get that. Now, the other question is because it's more likely than that they don't get the pick, right?
Right. And let me ask you something. Why do you think that? Do you think those picks are predetermined? I'll put it that way.
Oh, that's an interesting one because I was thinking about this right before we got on. I was like, well, you know what? Because somebody actually mentioned this on Twitter. They were like, man, there's no way they're sending that kid to Detroit. With all due respect, there is no way they're sending a kid with that magnitude to Detroit. He's either going to be a Houston Rocket or he's playing for the Spurs because those cities, markets, and brands make more sense for a player and a star of that ilk. So I definitely would buy into a little bit of the conspiracy theory because why wouldn't you nudge just a little bit if it's a business like we said it was just earlier in the show? It is a business. Do you want your most marketable star in over 2 decades to go honestly to a city where, it's just not, and you can market somebody anywhere these days, but you probably want them to be more so associated with, a bigger market or a different type of brand. So I do.
Well, here's the thing. I think with all that, taking that in consideration, and when I talk to people around the league, kind of like, not in the NBA, but who cover the league, and the thought is, y'all really think you're going to let him come to Houston? He is headed to San Antonio. So I don't know. We'll see tonight. We'll see. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but I do kind of wonder the Rockets have been at the bottom and they've not gotten that number one pick in the past 2 years. And so is this the year they get it? Is it tonight, the night that the basketball heavens open and allow that ping pong to bounce to the Rockets? That would be transformational for this organization.
If I'd say this, if it is predetermined, and this is conspiracy theory all galore on this, if it is predetermined, that takes a lot of the life out of it, because I feel less likely that the Rockets would be the predetermined destination. I feel like if it's predetermined, it's the Spurs.
Yeah, it's predetermined, it's the Spurs. If the Pistons get him, it's definitely not predetermined.
Yeah, it's definitely
so. Yep. But and so I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm not super confident that they're going to get him either. So let's just say they don't get that. They don't get the number one ping pong ball. So then it's Scoot.
Yep.
And number two.
Which also, and here's why I'm glad you point that out, because if it's Scoot, that also makes the question a lot less complicated. Here's where I am back, and then I'm talking about the James Harden question, because here's where I am with that, Kim. I reached a point at some point during this season, as we heard more and more about this James Harden thing, as much as I wasn't a fan of it when I first heard about it, I reached a point long ago of acceptance about it, because it sounds like it's something that they'll realistically do, that they'll realistically consider, even though I didn't like the idea. So I kind of graduated from a point of, I never want to see James Harden here again, to, okay, let me sort of start rationalizing and thinking of why exactly this would happen and how this could actually work. But I love the idea of eliminating that question and drafting Scoot Henderson, who I think is good enough to where in a couple of years, maybe by year 2, could even be a better player than James Harden, and letting that be your point guard of the future and pairing him up with Jalen Green. And we don't even have to have this James Harden conversation in free agency to begin with. I think that is a cool alternative, both to not being able to draft Victor Wembanyama, and a cool alternative to finding yourself where you're flirting with James Harden in a reunion with him. So I like it from both angles.
I like it from both angles too. Obviously, Victor is the choice you want. Charles says maybe that was the reason for the coaching change, to compete with the likelihood the Spurs were the predetermined choice.
Fascinating.
He's a lawyer, right? He's got great takes, right?
Charles, I like how you thinking, man. I'm a ponder on that one for a minute.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. So sticking with the NBA for a bit, conference finals, 2 coaches get fired. Monty Williams is out with the Suns. I don't know that. I wasn't super surprised. They've got new ownership. They were blown out the last 2 years when they lost in the, when they lost in the playoffs. The year before that, they were in the NBA finals. But, you made this big deal where you gave everything away for Kevin Durant. Not a lot of time for that kind of the sync, that chemistry to really settle in. And then you didn't really have much on your bench, right? You didn't have much depth. So I thought, really, you're going to fire Monty? But he's already in the conversation for some other jobs. So he's fired. Of course, the Bucks coach was fired, after they were bounced from the playoffs. And then the question now is, does Doc Rivers remain? Your thoughts? Yeah,
well, look, it looks like Doc has been fired.
Doc has been fired.
It looks like he has, if I'm correct. So yeah, now, so that's 3.
That's 3.
I honestly, here's the thing. When you underperform in the fashion in which those teams did, and you laid it out perfectly, I mean, you start with Phoenix, the way that they went out in their season, just gutless performance at home.
It was awful.
And it seemingly not even having the fight in you. Like that's hard for a coach. Like, even if he is, no matter what you think about him as a coach, whatever it is that he's doing is not working, because that team is not responding. Now, there's also an element of how that team was constructed. The fact that they traded all of their depth for KD, and like that seemed to be the defining factor against the team in Denver that had a lot of depth to it. So that's kind of fascinating to think about. Is that Monty Williams' fault? But but you still got to weigh that how it looked at the end, and it's the same thing with the Bucks being a number 1 seed losing to an 8 seed. You let the Miami Heat, who are known for out-scrapping teams, you let them out-scrap you as an 8 seed to knock you out as a 1 seed. So much for Giannis's comment about it not being a failure. Like, I understood where he was coming from, but hey, man, you're the number 1 seed. This is going to cost your coach's job. It's a failure. Like you cost your coach's job, the performance out there. And then with Doc, man, like I in some ways, and this is not even to defend Doc, but it's also to say, hey, what do you do when your MVP comes up small like that? And when your second best player
your second best, but your 2 future Hall of Famers don't do anything. Did you? There was a great shot on Twitter, or maybe Instagram, that someone posted of a play that James made or didn't make. It was, and they cut to Doc on the bench, who had this look like, this dude. I mean, it was just like, what else can you do? So that happened apparently right when the show started. Doc Rivers, according to Woj, was dismissed on Tuesday. That's what sources tell ESPN, that he is out.
Yeah, that's tough.
In Philly.
That's tough. And Kim, I was listening. I guess it was Monday morning. I was listening to some radio out there in Philly, and they had it out for all of them. Doc, Embiid, Harden, the fans and the media out there.
The Philly fans don't play.
They don't play. They don't play. They don't play at all. And that's why I was listening in on them, just to see how they were reacting to this whole thing. And they want everybody gone. Like they even want the MVP gone. But honestly, and that's ridiculous, of course. But honestly, after you perform like that or don't perform like that, it's hard to defend. It's hard to defend the coach, and it's honestly hard to defend the superstar on top of that. So
I don't think that last look is a look that should make. Now, listen, let's be clear. Rafael Stone's a huge fan, so I'm told, of James Harden. The owner likes James Harden, right? So, unless the basketball heavens give the Rockets some other direction, right? I think there's a chance that could happen. But that's a lot. And Sixers fans, Charles says that they were overrated because they had Doc. Kevin says, I don't even eat at 13, which is James Harden's restaurant. I feel like Philly fans. Yeah. But let me say this since we're speaking of Philadelphia, before we go, I want to make sure I get this in before we talk a little bit about those Astros. Congratulations to Jalen Hurts. Speaking of Philadelphia, we claim him as Houston's own, right? What a year he's had, led his team to the Super Bowl, and just graduated Spencer Tillman from OU with his MBA. So he'd already finished his undergraduate before he finished his college eligibility, and now he's got his master's. Just, congratulations. Kudos to
he's Jalen Hurts. I feel like
my little
I like it. Yeah, no, Jalen Hurts, I'll just say this, is like the example of what you want your son to be. You know what I mean? Like, you're trying to say, hey, be like, if you ever were to say, hey, be like this kid, he is one of them. He would be one of those examples. So shout out to Jalen Hurts. I love everything about Jalen Hurts.
Everything about him, the way he carries himself. There's Spencer Boomer Sooner. The way he has, he's talked about, he has an all-female team. Nicole Lynn, who we've heard a lot about in recent years. She's been doing big things with NFL players. And he had an article in Essence this, late winter, early spring, talking about supporting Black women. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. Like, this young man is just, at this point, is a standard. And you want to put all that pressure on him, like it's up to him to drag everyone else up. But it's just really refreshing and cool to see that. And then on the other hand, we are having this conversation about Ja Morant, right? And how he can't seem to get out of his own way. And I don't even know where to start with that. The recent he's, again, with the whole gun thing, riding around. And while what he did is not illegal, it was really in poor judgment. And I guess, Brandon, for me, not knowing what conversation he had with his team or the NBA, if they said, okay, this is strike one, and if this happens again, this is how we'll proceed. I don't know what they do this time because I don't know what the conversations were last time. I did think, though, that when he came back, he left before he was suspended. He went to, air quote, get some help. And I say air quote, not that I think help is not a good idea. I just am like, you got a real problem, but in 11 days, you good. So that was clearly a basketball decision by the league in Memphis to get him back on the court. He's one of the young, bright stars. He's the guy that they were kind of like hoisting up to be this one of the future faces of the league, but he can't get out of his own way. What do you think? What do you think will happen or should happen? I think it's, for me, separating what he did wasn't illegal. We live in a country where gun culture is everywhere. And so we expect more from him than we do from politicians. That's another show. So I struggle with how it should be handled, but there's no question he's guilty of really, really bad judgment.
Yeah, Kim, it shows a certain level of immaturity, recklessness, lack of awareness. Like, these are the things that we're talking about. And that's why the punishment part of it does nothing for me, Kim, whether he should be suspended, fined, and none of that. Like, I need somebody to get through to Ja, or Ja needs somebody to get through. It's not about me. Ja needs somebody to get through to him. And I don't know, without knowing him, honestly, I don't know how reachable he is, to be honest with you. I do not know. But that's the heart of the issue, is that this guy is behaving and operating with a certain level of immaturity that is not consistent with his stature, with who he is and what he represents. Like, it's one thing for
it's who we think he is.
Oh, no.
We don't know.
No. Who he is, Kim.
You mean as a player?
He's Ja Morant. He's Ja Morant. Like, he can't do this. It's one thing. How old is Ja Morant? 23?
20.
It's one thing for a young man who's 23 years old. Okay. It's one thing for a young man who's 23 years old to be on Instagram Live with a gun in his hand while music is playing. It's one thing. It's a horrible idea for anybody to do it, but any old guy, it's one thing.
Yeah.
It can't be Ja Morant. He can't be what his 23-year-old counterpart is or does. Like, you can't move the same way that regular people move. You're not a regular person.
I think that's what happens. You've got to surround your circle's important, right? Your circle is important. Who are the people around you? You're not getting good input and good counsel, and your circle's got to change. And some of these young people struggle with, well, I'm who I am, and those are my boys. But I just say, look at who LeBron James is. And what did he do with his boys? Y'all want to be in this space with me? Y'all going to all go and get some education. I got you. We're going to come back and we're going to build an empire, right? The short way to how they did it. But he elevated his boys so that they could elevate him, and they keep elevating the game. Ja didn't have the right circle. It's so sad. And you're right. How do you get through to somebody without hitting them in the pocketbook? Like my grandmother, right? Without hitting them where it hurts, which is money. Because he's about to step into this deal next year. He's got this new Nike deal. Nike kind of had him come in to replace Kyrie. He got a $250 million contract that kicks in September. Are you kidding me? You jeopardize all of that for kicking it with the homies?
Yeah, but you know what? Honestly, Kim, it's even bigger than that, because that's almost the least of his worries. Because he's probably got enough money already to last him a lifetime if he weren't to screw it up, obviously. Yeah. But honestly, we're talking about he's messing with his life with these guns.
With his life.
Like, I don't know the details of how he's getting down for sure, but just some of the stories that we've heard that have come out about Ja Morant, and then all of this on top. Like, there were stories about him with guns even before the two incidents that have now gotten him reprimanded publicly by the team in the NBA. Like, there was the story of, and maybe not just the guns, but like a laser being pointed at somebody's team bus.
Riding around, he was in a car with somebody, and they were riding around with a laser. Yeah.
Supposedly beat up some kid that he was playing basketball with at his house. There was an incident at a mall where there was a scene, and like, depending on how exactly he's moving, okay, he could be messing with his life. And that's why I say
That's a very good
somebody's got
Yeah.
to reach him, because even if the money's there, if he's not here to enjoy it and to continue to make it, that's such a much bigger ramification. Like, that's the thing that I hope somebody is able to get across to him. Is like, hey man, you don't have to move like this. And in fact, you should not be moving like this. You are too valuable. You have so much going for yourself, way too much to live for. And like it's
too much to lose.
And when
I say too much, when you talk about the life piece, like that is the I'm invincible. I can do whatever I want. And that's beyond how much money you make, right? That's a thing that we see with some people that is kind of scary. Charles says he needs a 24/7 mentor and a counselor now. It needs to be two people he respects, and it must be a long-term relationship. That's what he needs, but is he willing to accept that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is he willing to accept that?
We don't know. Then that's the fascinating question. It's like, man, I don't, like I opened it with, I don't know how reachable he is. And I hope he is, for his own sake.
I hope he is too. Okay, before we get out, who are you picking to come out of the East, and who are you kicking to come out of the West?
Yeah, I've got a Denver-Boston one here, but Miami intrigues me because they're the 8th seed. It feels like when an 8th seed gets this far that it's just destiny that they at least make the finals. And so I put it to you like this. My head says Boston in the East, and my heart says Miami. And part of that too is because of Jimmy Butler, Jimmy
Butler and Eric Spoelstra. I like him.
Yes. And Eric Spoelstra.
I like him.
I would say the Jimmy Butler thing too is there's also a kind of a Houston emotional tie there, similar to the way we were talking about Jalen Hurts earlier. Yeah. I kind of feel similarly about Jimmy Butler, but you're right. Eric Spoelstra arguably is the best head coach in the NBA right now. So when you think about that, there's a part of me that really wants to pick Miami, but I think that Boston is overall a better team. So I'm gonna pick Boston, and I think Denver has been the most impressive team of the playoffs. I see we already got some picks coming in the comments.
So listen,
for now,
I like what Darvin Ham has done with this Laker team. If you think about where they started, right, how they started, the adjustments he made in the playoffs, but you're going to have Anthony Davis playing at the top of his game each night, both ends of the floor, because Jokic is a beast. And I don't know how you match up with Jokic. So my head says Denver. I'd like it to be LA, but it's difficult to pick against Jokic and the Nuggets. They're just a very difficult matchup. And he's got a pretty good sidekick. And I hate to call Murray a sidekick because he's so much better than that. But the Lakers and LeBron is also tough to pick against him. In the East, though, I'm gonna go with Miami. I know Boston on paper, we've said all year, is the best, is the most talent. I'm gonna go with Miami in the East, and I'm pulling for the Lakers. But if I had to pick, I would pick Denver in the West.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I know it's hard, and you're right about what Darvin Ham has done with the Lakers. They deserve a lot of credit. I put it to you like this, Kim. I own this. When this whole thing started, I did not even entertain that Miami or the Lakers had a chance.
I know, right?
I didn't think they had a chance, and that's with the respect to everybody that we just mentioned: Eric Spoelstra, Jimmy Butler, LeBron James, obviously one of the greatest of all time. With respect to all of those guys, I just didn't see it. I thought that the Lakers were far too inconsistent, even with the changes that they made. I just didn't feel like they had enough, or that they had been maybe together for long enough. But man, you want to talk about togetherness? Think about that. The way that they looked like a more connected team, the Lakers did. They were a more connected team
than the Warriors.
The Warriors won all these championships together and couldn't and are fractured. The Warriors themselves are fractured into the young guys and the older guys, the established guys, right? And Steve Kerr not really being able to put it all together. And look, the Lakers, a team that just got put together 5 minutes ago, look like the more experienced or put together team. So I was surprised by that and fascinated by that. And it makes you feel like the Lakers might have a lot more to them than I probably gave them credit for. But Denver's just been a machine.
Denver's been a machine.
They've been the best team in the
machine. Yeah.
There's just no way around that. They've been the best team in the playoffs.
All right. Well, we are out of time. We didn't get to the Astros, but I will say the Astros won again last night. They have won 5 of their last 6 games. They're chugging back. Jose Altuve started his rehab assignment in Corpus Christi. It's been a while since he's probably had to ride a bus someplace, although he probably flew down there. But at any rate, we'll see what happens. I told y'all it's too early to bail on the Astros. We'll come back and talk about the Stros another time. As always, thank you so much, Brandon Scott. I'll be, are you covering Astros tonight?
No, I won't be there tonight because I got lottery stuff. So
I'm going to go to Astros early, then I'll be tuning in to lottery. So I will talk to you soon, my friend. Thank you as always for being a part of the show. You were amazing. You make this a great time. I won a new little toy. And I will talk to you soon. Much appreciation for you, my friend.
Thank you for having me as always. I appreciate it.
All right. That was Brandon Scott, one of the best to do it in the market. I'm going to just say in the business. He's a friend and a colleague. And another reminder to support CHAMP. It's a nonprofit organization that is there to provide resources for veterans. And if you see somebody having some sort of a mental health crisis, dial 988. It could save a life. So remember, do something kind for yourself and do something kind for somebody else. If you are not registered to vote, I'm encouraging you to get registered. That way, if you stay registered, you don't have to get registered. I will never tell you who to vote for. I'm always going to encourage you to vote, be prepared so that you can vote for your, vote your conscience, vote your values. All right. So make it a great, great week. I'll see you next Tuesday right here on Chalk Talk. In the meantime, share this show with your audience wherever you're watching it, and make sure that you follow me on all of my social platforms. I'll keep you up to date on things that are happening. Follow me tonight so we can see what happens with this lottery. What will happen? Make it a great day, everybody. See you next week.